Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of All Access AM. I'm Billy Embody. Happy Thursday. Happy college football playoff semifinal day to you as Ole Miss and Miami getting down to it in the desert tonight. And then Friday, of course, Oregon versus Indiana out there in the Peach Bowl. We'll react to all of that next week. But this is our transfer portal bonanza episode filled with intel that we can try to get you guys caught up with what all is going on in the ACC with top transfers, players leaving the conference, players coming to the conference. All of these things we'll try to break down for you guys in 1 hour or so. So appreciate you guys being here. 8 o'clock Central Time. Had to get Jack off to school today. So decided to do an hour later for this transfer portal bonanza. Got him all settled. He's bringing all the intel to his buddies there in the toddler world. But we're going to bring it to you guys and try to explain it to you guys, at a little higher level, maybe like you're 5, maybe like you're 10. But no, all seriousness, you guys are here for the transfer portal intel. We'll try to give it to you guys as clean and directly as we can as this world changes so quickly. So excited to do this episode. I am a recruitnik at heart. That is how I grew up in the industry. I grew up watching all of the different message boards really across the SEC. I grew up in Florida, so grew up in ACC country for our Hurricane fans out there. But really, most of my friends growing up were Gators or Seminoles. That was what it was in Tampa, Florida. I was not among them, but did attend a Gator game or two growing up with some of them. But I knew growing up in kind of that SEC mindset, with really Florida fans all around me, that recruiting was king. And recruiting has changed so much over the course of college football history now with the transfer portal coming into the fold. And we've seen it develop from kind of something that a few schools really got on early and we're all in on. And then the big dogs kind of got around to it and realized, oh, wow, we can do what we've been doing for so long with this piece. And then you added in NIL, and then you added in what is just straight up lawlessness around college football. And so we have this wild world of the portal. If we have time at the end, I will talk about Damon Williams, and I'll probably talk about him in the middle because Miami is at least mentioned with Washington quarterback Damon Williams, but they, obviously are not the one being talked about right now. LSU is that main one with Damon Williams, a Washington quarterback who's trying to go back on a deal he signed. Wild, wild times. We're going to try to keep it to the ACC, but naturally there's so much to talk about in this world that will overlap. And speaking of overlapping, you want to overlap some layers this time of year. Certain parts of the country feel very cold. Our friends at Horn Legend have debuted a couple of jackets for you guys that are unreal. I've got a couple of them on order now. Their quilted jackets are really, really comfortable from what they've been telling me. They were like, look, we know you run hot, you sweat, you don't really need a jacket, but try these out. They'll change your wardrobe. You could also get one for the significant other in your life. You can get them all hooked up with a Horn Legend jacket. They have the vests available, but our friends at Horn Legend are outfitting college football fans across the country as well. They've got some terrific lineups for ACC fans across the country to also look at polos, pullovers, and more as you get ready to really ramp up your basketball wardrobe. For ACC fans, we're looking at you. Make sure you guys check out Horn Legend. That's code PONY. That gets you free shipping from our friends at Horn Legend. Go to hornlegend.com for more options on how you can completely revamp your wardrobe. I've got a big order coming in this week for jackets and kind of the button downs. We're trying to ramp it up a little bit for you guys. We'll show off some of the button downs, and I really like the hidden button line that they have from Horn Legend because I just kind of like the spread collar a little bit. And anyway, they do a great job over there at Horn Legend. They support the pod and sponsor the Thursday show. So we appreciate their support here at All Access AM. Thank you to you guys for tuning in as well. We appreciated all the comments in the chat the other day, and do that every day, please. Just comment, let us know you're there, and please hit that subscribe button for us to the All Access AM YouTube channel. All right, with the housekeeping, with the little intro out of the way, we got to talk about the portal. And what I did in my approach to this episode was I went to on3.com. I work for on3rivals.com. We have so many people across our network that do a terrific job. Steve Wiltfong, Pete Nakos, that entire crew of analysts across the country really diving into the transfer portal and sharing what they know with our subscribers. And I went down over the last week or so and I pulled all the articles. And then I scoured the transfer portal pages and I tried to make sense as best I could of what was going on, because this is like cramming for an exam. And this is how personnel staffs kind of feel, except they have large staffs for the most part that can sit around all season and say, hey, let's watch this week's team that we're playing in the ACC. Let's go ahead and watch their team. And let's use our crew of analysts to go through and let's look at all the guys who have eligibility back, right? Let's look at all of the guys who could possibly leave. Let's start there. Let's go through and comb through their film, because then we can assign a grade to them and not only scout them for the game, we can scout them for a potential departure in the transfer portal. And we'll know quickly, is that someone we take? Yes or no? Okay, great. We'll put them on the board and we'll tuck that away and we'll grade them. So when you start looking at how some of these personnel staffs have really done all of this, they've been doing it all year. They've looked at guys last year who maybe came in as true freshmen that were highly touted, who didn't play much. And then they go into this year and they still don't play that much. They play a little bit more. They have a role, but maybe they're unhappy with that role. And their agent, their family, they say, man, you got to be in the portal. And they go in the portal. And that is how you have to be ready to strike, is that sign of early, maybe not unrest publicly, but as a competitor brewing underneath their skin, in their head, they're saying, I might not be, you know, better off transferring, or I might not be better off staying with this program. I want to transfer. And that is why you've got to obviously keep an eye on all this as a personnel staffing department. You've got to be ahead of it. Shout out Jerry Morphew for being in the chat. He says, this time of day is much better for me. I will say this. It's nice. The cobwebs are a little bit more off. I kind of like to also take care of our Eastern time friends as well with that 7 a.m. slot. But I know sometimes 7 to 8 is a little tough for some people. There are more early morning risers. There are people that don't have kids in the house. That 7 a.m. spot kind of is either a sweet spot for some, depending on how early the kiddos wake up, or it's right in the middle of routine. So I appreciate you being here, Jerry. And as we go through this, guys, if you have feedback on the time or feedback on the format, feel free to drop it in the chat or drop it in the comments section in our YouTube channel, and we'll check them out. We'll continue to fine tune this machine. Maybe we take one day a week and we go 8 a.m. Who knows? But we appreciate you guys being here Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7 to 8 a.m. Central Time live right now, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern Time. And so let's dive on in to this portal. And I want to start with quarterbacks in the ACC. And we'll try to do this as best we can because it moves so quickly. But let's look at some of the quarterback needy teams. I like that. I'm 72 and early mornings and me don't get along anymore. I like it, Jerry. Good for you being sleeping in. But let's start with the quarterback needy teams. And Florida State is the one that I, of course, wanted to start with because FSU is at a very critical juncture of the Mike Norvell era. Yes, Captain Obvious sitting right here in front of you in his quote unquote little studio he's got. Auburn quarterback Ashton Daniels is going to try and lead Mike Norvell's team out of that juncture into a greener pasture, as Florida State did land a commitment from him just a couple days ago now. And he is somebody that I am actually pretty high on in a sense. I think he's been in some poor situations over the course of his career. I think he's not been somebody who's been given the tools to succeed, nor the trust to grow and succeed. And he threw for 797 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions last year. He rushed for 280 and 2 touchdowns on 63 carries. He'll bring you that type of dual threat ability that Gus Malzahn and Mike Norvell want to have in a quarterback. And he's been well traveled. There's no question about it. He's been kind of all over the place starting out at Stanford. I thought there was a lot of promise early on as he spent 3 years at Stanford and was the starting quarterback that last year of the Troy Taylor era. I watched him play in person against SMU and he kind of challenged. He just didn't have too much help around him in a sense. And he was, not somebody that you could necessarily trust because of the situation around him, I think, and just that offensive scheme in general. I am kind of in that same boat as what we saw from him at Auburn. That offensive staff didn't do anything to help their quarterbacks outside of surround them with some great wide receiver talent that they couldn't get the ball to and really couldn't do anything with. And it was a revolving door at quarterback. I think they started 3, maybe 4 different quarterbacks: Jackson Arnold, Deuce Knight, Ashton Daniels. Maybe there's another quarterback in there that they started, but you have somebody who is now going into a system that I think for the first time in his career fits him at a pretty high level. And the problem is what version of FSU are we going to get when the 2026 Seminoles take the field? And that is something that, once again, Ashton Daniels might not be able to overcome. That's the problem for him. And that's been something that's chased him his entire career. Let's look at the transfers in for the Seminoles so far in this 2026 recruiting class as we do try to roll through some of these big ones. The Seminoles do add Paul Bowling. They just got him in from Troy. He's a big offensive lineman who committed to them and jumped in the boat. I did have a story up on him and can't find it right now, but there it is. He came in to this program looking to provide versatility. And Georgia Tech and North Carolina were also recruiting him. He comes in with 12 games started. He did start at center for Troy, but also played a little bit of guard. So it gives you a little bit of position versatility. Not highly rated. Not a big time transfer get for Mike Norvell. I think the one that I really like when you look at what he's going to bring to the table is a Texas kid that I've followed a little bit coming from Mansfield Lake Ridge right here down the road from me is Rylan Kennedy. And you look at what he can bring from a size perspective off the edge. That's something that really flashes. He had 14 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks. He does have 2 years of eligibility left. And then they brought in an intriguing tight end from East Carolina, 6'3", 238-pound tight end, Desirio Riles. He comes in as a second leading pass catcher for the East Carolina Pirates at the tight end position last year. John David Baker, their offensive coordinator, went over to Ole Miss to be the offensive coordinator for Pete Golding. So he leaves, his tight ends leave. I think that entire offense, for East Carolina got gutted at the skill position, part. And he jumps in and lands at FSU. And they also are able to add, offensive line help. I think that was really important for them. Nate Paps, Braden Joyner, those guys are 2 pretty, well-rated transfers. So when you look down the middle of this page, if you're watching on YouTube, you see their high school ranking there and what they're rated coming out of high school. And then you see the number that says TR, that's transfer rating. Those 87s are usually guys that, you're expecting to contribute. You're expecting to get in and have an impact on your team. And then they bring in a well thought of running back in Trey Wisner, who's committed to them over the weekend. And, Trey Wisner, a former Texas running back, can come in and I think get a better opportunity to, have a bigger role. Texas had all sorts of running backs involved. CJ Baxter was in their backfield and you could just never see it really click at a high level. for Trey Wisner this season, coming off of a really successful 2024 campaign. He's a 1,000-yard rusher in that 2024 season. So FSU's hoping that he brings a lot more to the table for them this season than he did for the Longhorns this season. And FSU not done in the portal by any means, but certainly a team that you're keeping an eye on as far as what all they're losing, which is a lot of highly touted recruits. And this is the problem for Mike Norvell. If you watch this transfer portal for them, look at the middle of this page, and this is just unbelievable when you really watch it unfold. And this is, I guess, the problem here, but you look down the middle of this page, and if you're watching on YouTube, former former four-star, former four-star and Kai Bates. I mean, it's just all over, and that's the problem for Mike Norvell is they're not hitting on these big-time prospects, and we've talked a lot about it. So that is where they're going to have to make some changes. Edwin Joseph did leave the program. He was another player that was well thought of. They're just in a weird situation right now where they haven't been able to, I think, develop the players that they've gotten. And on top of that, they lose even the good ones. Earl Little Jr. leaves after they make the change at the defensive backs coach position, and he's on the move, and he was second team all ACC. So there's a lot of up and down when it comes to this Florida State program, and we know that it's all over the place. You can't get away from it, but they have got to hit on these transfer portal evaluations. It is just imperative for FSU if they're going to have any chance under Mike Norvell this season to get anything accomplished, as far as taking this program back up to the level that it's been at. So it's going to be fascinating to watch FSU unfold. We would go over normally to the other side of that rivalry and look at Miami, but Miami really hasn't had anything going on too much. We'll talk about them at the end, but they really haven't gotten into recruiting the portal because, they're playing for a college football playoff national championship right now. They're playing for that spot to go play for it. And so we haven't seen too much movement off that roster, and we haven't seen too much movement toward that roster. So they're going to be in a really interesting spot whenever things heat up for them to see what they do. There are a couple teams out there that are either just kind of standing pat almost, or just not making the moves you would normally think that you would see from some of these teams. So FSU has made moves. Miami has not. But let's look at another kind of ACC classic power in a sense, and that's Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech has been one of the biggest stories of college football, bringing in James Franklin, having the finish that they did in the high school recruiting ranks, getting just so close to a top 25 recruiting class, and bringing in the guys that they did to get to 27th overall in those rankings. But they've also now had a good bit of success in the transfer portal. They bring in a guy like Jaquez White, a cornerback that is really, really talented out of Troy. That was a highly touted prospect that they were able to get on board for this 2026 commit class. And you look at this group, it's exactly kind of what the doctor ordered. A lot of really nice bodies, I would say, from a standpoint of they look the part. Javion Hilson, I remember him coming out of South Florida. Justin Bell comes over from Michigan State, a big 6'7", 300-something pounder to be a part of the offensive line rebuild that they're bringing on there in Blacksburg. And I think when James Franklin looks at this roster, of course they had to have a quarterback as well, and the expectation is that Ethan Grunkmeyer is going to be somebody to keep an eye on here, from what I understand, for their quarterback position. And Ethan Grunkmeyer, Penn State quarterback, a really well thought of quarterback in the transfer portal, and is expected to be that guy, announcing, or really the news leaking over the weekend, that he was going to be the quarterback for James Franklin. And I think I mean, this might be a hot take, but I think Ethan Grunkmeyer was really a higher upside player than a Drew Aller. And you've watched backup quarterbacks leave Penn State now, and Bo Pribula, who left for Missouri, it kind of didn't work out there. He got hurt and all those things, but he had some success. Ethan Grunkmeyer, I thought, is kind of another higher upside guy for the quarterback position than Drew Aller. Just kind of looking back on it, it's hindsight 2020. But man, for Ethan Grunkmeyer to enter the portal and Virginia Tech to be the favorite, it's really a good move for James Franklin. It brings in somebody who is familiar with what you want to do offensively, familiar with your systems, and that is a really good starting point as far as setting the culture and setting the expectation for your program. So right now, Virginia Tech sitting with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 transfers by my count, and it'll be interesting to see how they finish this thing off. They have had some guys leave the program. Caleb Wooten left the program. He was a pretty well thought of guy in that Virginia Tech program. Of course, Dante Lovett Jr. is headed to UCLA. He's kind of toyed with the portal a good bit over the course of his career. If I followed that right, I'm pretty sure he went in and maybe went out last year. So quite the move for him. But they are still in the hunt for some really impressive talent, and they're trying to bring in more players at the running back position. Corey Smith, who's a former Penn State running back as well, so that is one to watch over there. But James Franklin, I mean, they're going to get players. That's the thing about what they've signed up for with James Franklin, as he can recruit. And so he is somebody that I think we're going to watch really closely here to see if they can make a big splash down the stretch, or if they want to continue to, now that they've had some guys who can kind of set the culture, set the tone, come in, maybe they can move into that next stage, which is, okay, let's build this through the high school ranks and continue to keep spots in that regard for that. So Virginia Tech, though, continues to be a really fun watch if you are a transfer portal, you know, type of person, somebody that watches it day in, day out. Seeing what James Franklin is up to is something that we always like to see. Clemson and Dabo Sweeney, of course, a program that has treated the transfer portal like poison ivy over the course of its existence, is now getting into it at a higher level in their defensive recruiting and going out and grabbing some players that can make an impact. They pull in an Oklahoma transfer and Marcus Strong, a big defensive lineman who has played in the SEC, has made some plays over the course of his career. They've brought in Donovan Starr, a former Auburn transfer, to come in and shore up that secondary as well. Dabo Sweeney and Tom Allen, they have their work cut out for themselves, but they're not done. They're even going into the junior college ranks and bringing in a junior college defensive lineman that our friends at Tiger Illustrated broke the news on early this morning as we were getting ready to record the show. And I think this is where Clemson has to look at themselves in the eye and say, okay, are we going all in, or are we just going halfway in? And it seems like with the transfers that they've added, they have brought in a number of them, so it's not like last year where it was so limited, but they're already up to 7 transfer additions, and they're not done. And they've revamped the secondary. They've added 4 different defensive backs into the fold, a former blue chip kid and Elliott Washington Jr. from Penn State, Corey Myrick coming over from Southern Miss, who played on a really good Southern Miss, I think athletically team. That is a group that always kind of checks the boxes in that regard. I feel like they've done a good job recruiting it. And I just look at Clemson and say, okay, now what are you going to do next on the offensive line? Because most everything we've seen is on defense. And yes, that is an area that needs help, that Tom Allen needs help with. But I don't know how you can look at that offense this year for Dabo Sweeney and think that you're throwing the keys to the car to Chad Morris and it being a good spot. Now, the the secondary was an issue. They've made some changes. We've seen, I think some buzz around them bringing in a quarterback. I think that makes a lot of sense to compete with Christopher Vizina and Chris Denson. But who knows? I mean, that they know them, and how much input is Chad Morris going to have, and or how much of it is just hoping Chandler Morris has another year and then can come play for his dad. That is hope is not a strategy. Hope is free. And that is the problem, is you can't bank on things like that in a sense when you're dealing with a quarterback position, in particular. You can say, okay, we've gone out and we've brought in 4 new defensive backs. They added Courtney Kelly. They added Marcus Strong on the defensive line. They've done some digging in the transfer portal and digging in with some really nice additions for Tom Allen to work with defensively. But you can't sit there at the quarterback position and say, "Oh well, we really hope Christopher Vizina is it. We hope Chris Denson is it." That's just not that's not where Clemson is. That is not the level of program that they should be operating under. And at the same time, then you can look at the defense and say, well, now we hope that all of these guys can develop and work together and field a better defense in 2026. But that's because you've addressed it. That's because you've taken that out of the hope hands and you've turned it into we expect, because we've gone out and done that. So that is the difference that Clemson is now working with in that area. And it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. But Clemson is now putting, they're standing on that first step in the pool. And they might even be like down on the second. They might be sitting in the pool a little bit, but you're not getting, your entire bathing suit wet. You're not jumping in fully, but they're in the portal. They're working in that area. How they finish is going to be really interesting to see how that all plays out for Dabo Swinney. And then we can readjust expectations going into 2026 based on what the entire body of work looks like. And speaking of body of work, and we'll get into a little bit more transfer talk in a second on body of work, because it is somewhere I wanted to go with another talking point on this whole thing. But Socorro Tequila's body of work is just incredible. Award-winning tequila that you can trust, and it can help you get through the transfer portal era. And this is a brand that is tried and true as far as trusting it to deliver a high level tequila for you to enjoy on your weekends as a easy sipper during the week, whether it be the Blanco, Añejo, or Reposado. Check them out, our friends at SocorroTequila.com. You can get free shipping on 3 bottles or more when you order online from our friends at SocorroTequila.com. So check out their award-winning tequila. It's just agave, water, and yeast. Really clean. Love it. Appreciate their support of All Access AM. So where I wanted to go with the body of work. The body of work for so many of these transfer portal classes is only just beginning. And I thought Clemson, when I was kind of planning out the show, was the epitome of, well, what is the overall body of work? And what does that look like when it's all said and done? Because Clemson sits there and you can see the vision over the course of what they've done in the portal so far of addressing the defensive side of the ball. You can see that. It's very obvious. It's clear. They've made that a emphasis, but they've also lost so many players now from their roster that probably could help them. That probably can make changes to their results on the field in a positive fashion. And I'm not in the Clemson program day in, day out. So there's some of these that I know, like a Khalil Barnes committing to Georgia. There's a lot of that, really? Okay, all right, you're leaving, you're fine. That's okay. But there's also some talent that's walking out the door. Stefylan Green is leaving for LSU. Shelton Lewis has ended up going to Arkansas, cornerback for them. There are going to be more players that are going to be taken by college programs around the country because of the Dabo Swinney kind of character, that they target, and for a long time the evaluations that have normally hit in that respect. And so the body of work for Clemson is really interesting because we're sitting here and it's January 8th. The portal doesn't close until January 16th, maybe the 15th. I always forget which one it is because, yeah, it runs till the 16th. So you'll see guys even show up in the portal on the 17th, maybe the 18th. And then they've got to turn around and make a decision and get into class and get into a school for the spring so that then they can compete and go somewhere else. That is a long time in the portal. We're seeing players that are entering the transfer portal that, and we'll talk about one in a moment as we move on to Miami here in a second. But you look at what amount of time is left in the portal, and what is happening here is agents are working behind the scenes. Agents are trying to get a good deal for their players to either go somewhere else or to find out what other opportunities are out there. And all of those things can result in, on the final day of the portal, being like, hey, we know that we kind of had a little bit of a loose agreement here to return to X school or Y school, but we've got a better situation. We're going to go ahead and portal. Then you've got to pivot, and then you've got to really move quickly. And with Clemson, they could be having those discussions on the offensive side of the ball. So Clemson is very much a wait and see type of program right now when you look at the transfer portal and what they're doing, because they've done a lot on the defense. They're not done. And at the same time, they really haven't done much of anything offensively. So they have some things to work out as Chad Morris gets settled on that side of the ball. Miami is a fascinating transfer portal discussion right now because we know that Miami has recruited the high school ranks really well. We also know that Miami has recruited the transfer portal ranks really well. They've been one of the top teams in the transfer world to do it, and at the same time, um, they have not gone out and added anyone. They have not gone out and found other players just yet to join. It just seems like they're either working quietly in the world of the transfer portal and looking at different options, but they haven't brought anyone in. And they've lost a few guys. They've lost Dalen Russell, who did commit to Louisville. He was a former blue chip type of prospect who ended up committing to Miami. He was defensive player of the year coming out of high school in the South Florida area, and he ends up going to Louisville. So he is going to go play for Ron English and company. Charles Brantley, who was a transfer, I believe, from Michigan State. Yeah, from Michigan State, transfers back to Michigan State. He just never caught on. He had some injury issues coming into the program. And then Dante Simpson is going to be a really highly thought of transfer defensive lineman that is leaving the program just after his true freshman season. A South Florida kid leaving the program before the season's even up. So it's really kind of interesting. He's gotten some flack for it on social media, of course, but he is moving on, looking for a different role. And so other than that, though, there really haven't been a ton of major changes, for this Miami team. And at the same time, you've got to find a quarterback. Miami's in the hunt for a quarterback. They're losing Carson Beck. They haven't been linked to too many. They've been linked to a Lenore Sellers who re-signed. They've been linked to a couple of other players around the country who haven't really matriculated and shown themselves yet. Now, Damon Williams, the Washington quarterback, is allegedly reneging on the contract that he signed with Washington, and it has been an incredibly poorly handled situation on his side of things. LSU is the major favorite here. There's no question about that, but Miami could be sneaking into this one just quietly behind the scenes if he does, in fact, get out of this deal, which is believed to be in the $4 million range. He had really, become this key piece for Washington that they got back under their program for Jed Fish at Washington. And after appearing in 26 games over 2 seasons, He, completed, had a big, I thought 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He is somebody that would be highly thought of in the transfer portal. Could Miami get in there? Could Miami get in the mix for Damon Williams if he does indeed enter the transfer portal? If Washington allows him to leave again, LSU, Lane Kiffin, they're the favorites. He was once committed to them out of high school, ends up flipping to Arizona, ends up following Jed Fish from Arizona to Washington when he gets that job. But now it is just an entirely murky situation here for Damon Williams. Maybe Miami could slip in there, but that is the challenge for Mario Cristobal. He is locked in on the world of the college football playoff, as he should be. But man, it's just Miami's just been sneaky quiet. Sneaky quiet. If they win this football game Thursday night as we're recording this, what an interesting time it's going to be in Coral Gables. What are fans going to look back on this and say when it's all said and done, when the body of work is done for this transfer portal class? That is going to be really interesting because so far it's been tight-lipped about what's going on there in Coral Gables. So really interesting stuff over there. Let's look at some of the quarterback dominoes that have fallen in the ACC. I want to start with one that is interesting to me. Wake Forest quarterback Deshaun Purdy did enter the transfer portal. He'll have 2 years of eligibility remaining, leaving Robbie Ashford as the Demon Deacons starting quarterback. He is also, I believe Robbie is headed out, graduating after this year. So with that, Wake Forest goes out and brings in another quarterback. And they are bringing in Gio Lopez from North Carolina, committed to the Demon Deacons. This is a really, I think, good move for Jake Dickert. I know it was rough. It was really, really rough when it came to what we saw from Gio Lopez in that UNC offense this year. But how much of that was Freddie Kitchens? Obviously, he made the jump up from South Alabama. It was a big jump up to the Power 4 level. Not many guys can do it. Not many players are Darian Mensah. Not many players are Cam Ward. It's just reality. They're more exceptions to the rules than they are the reason why you should go after some of these group of 5 guys. But nonetheless, Bill Belichick and that group didn't surround them with anything special offensively. And so Gio Lopez gets a fresh start, just down the road at Wake Forest now, and UNC is going to be bringing in a different quarterback as well, and it's going to be one that you're going to want to see results right away. That is what they're going to be looking for. Miles O'Neill, former Texas A&M quarterback, did commit to UNC. To add to that transfer room, Billy Edwards, former Wisconsin quarterback, committed to the Tar Heels. So they bring in 2 quarterbacks out of the transfer portal. I don't know if it's going to work. I really don't know if it's going to work, but both of them get added to that UNC transfer portal room, or quarterback room from the transfer portal. And it's just, I'll be really interested to see how this works out with Bobby Petrino, having them in the quarterback room now. Stanford did add a quarterback transfer as well. Davis Warren has signed with Andrew Luck in Stanford. This is honestly kind of, when I saw this, I was like, okay, 1, didn't know he was in the portal, but 2, all right, sneaky good fit. He just seems like a Stanford type of guy. He's played in 17 games across 3 seasons. He's thrown for 1,200 yards or so, 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, but also California native who's coming back home to the area and is going to now be able to be a part of what could be a really special deal with Tavita Pritchard taking over as at his alma mater, working with Andrew Luck, the staff that they've put together there. But I think for Davis Warren, he's going to be a backup guy. So they add some depth. They have Elijah Brown, who's got some talent, and I think that's going to be the guy of the future. But I don't know. Just something says don't sleep on Davis Warren in there in that Stanford quarterback room. Maybe he's just getting back to Cali and wants to kind of ride it out there with that Stanford program and be set up there. So going to be interesting to watch there. Let's move on to another program that I think has made a ton of waves so far, and that is Cal. Cal under Tosh Lupoy, who has done a really, really nice job here assembling a strong group of of players into this program and guys that can help, really good bodies overall, and ones that I think you could see see the vision of Tosh Lupoy trying to revamp this roster, because they were able to bring in Adam Muhammad, who's a really talented back from Washington. He played in all 13 games for the Huskies this year. He had 523 yards on the ground, 5 touchdowns. He also kind of caught the ball at an okay rate, 17 catches, 138 yards, and he's played right away. So I think that's a good, selling point right there when you look at what he can bring to the table for this Cal Bears offense. Of course, they've got Jaron Kiwa Sagapatelli back, but they have really done a nice job here bringing in some serious talent for this program at the offensive level. Dorian Thomas, another tight end who's really well thought of, coming out of New Mexico, maybe New Mexico State, coming into the program as well. New Mexico State or New Mexico, one of the two. Let's see. People are just screaming. New Mexico, really talented tight end. I get those logos confused all the time, but really talented tight end to come in for Dron's for JKS. We'll leave it at that. And then they bring in Ian Strong, who's a really, really, really good wide receiver from Rutgers. That is a really, really big upgrade for them at the wide receiver position. And then Carter Vargas and Ashton Emery are two other backs that they've added into the fold. Really tough, hard-nosed backs to bring into that program as well, and just kind of continue to add depth there. And then they've added, a couple guys on the defensive side of the ball to the mix. So they're not done. They're still continuing to add pieces. And as far as their biggest transfer portal needs, they got one of them right off the bat with the wide receiver position. They do need to continue to address the defensive back room, because they do lose some of their talent. They have two new secondary coaches in, and this is still something that they are going to be looking to address in the transfer portal, and see what they come up with out there in Berkeley. They did add Texas A&M transfer defensive lineman Solomon Williams, who did go to my high school out there in Tampa, Carrollwood Day School. So good luck to him out there in Berkeley as he comes in from Texas A&M. But what you're seeing with Cal is a lot of what you would have expected with a recruiter like Tosh Lupoy coming into the mix. And that is something that, I think we're it's worth keeping an eye on as a whole, because they haven't recruited like you would have hoped. And they are, getting back to that. It's pretty apparent that they've dumped some money into the program right away, and they're looking to, grab a quarterback as well, to kind of help the room in general. Braden Atkinson out of Mercer is a name that has been floated in that regard. So, keep an eye on that and what they're doing there to continue to address the position across all sorts of different levels. So, and going back over to, the other side of, that rivalry with Stanford. I mean, that's Stanford's having to do it through the high school ranks. So it's going to be a very different evaluation process as we look at these programs and what they're doing side by side. They can't be evaluated in the same way because Cal just has a little bit easier of a time, going after these transfers. So that is something to also keep in mind as we go through this whole process of the transfer portal. But let's continue on here. And one school that I think is really intriguing here as we kind of get into the back half of the show is NC State. NC State has, gotten CJ Bailey back, which, he's announced, he's done all of the things to say he is back. It's scary because, he's been linked to Miami. I'm not saying that he's going to go back on this. I don't see it. But man, that's scary because Hollywood Smothers is left. NC State has seen a lot of their kind of top talent leave through the transfer portal in a sense outside of CJ Bailey. So they have to bring in a lot of talent. What they've done is bring in Victor Snow, a wide receiver from Buffalo. They brought in Jamarian McCrimmon from East Carolina, a big offensive lineman who's brought in. But when you look at Victor Snow, I mean he is somebody that is just kind of that speedy slot you know player who's gone from walk on to a really productive player over the course of his college career that now gets to play in the ACC. And they added a former SMU Mustang, Jackson Waller, a punter. So they're at 3 transfer portal commitments right now. They got to get it rolling because Terrell Anderson's going to USC, leaving that wide receiver room. They lost a couple other highly thought of transfers. Jacarius Peak is one of the top offensive linemen. So who's going to be there for CJ Bailey? That's a big question I have, is what is going to be left for him? Because there's a lot of issues that they now have to address. And these are all things that we've talked about throughout the season. They needed to give him more help from a coaching perspective. But man, we really thought that NC State, they lost Casey Concepcion and things like that. But now you see Hollywood Smothers leave. You see Terrell Anderson leave. You see some of their other, highly thought of players leave for the portal. And that's concerning at a very high level. So, man, they have got to get it figured out and find a way to 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 fight back by bringing in players that can help out CJ Bailey. Otherwise, this thing's going to get a little sideways in my opinion, because you don't lose talent like Jacarius Peak on the offensive line and some of the things that have happened to them and not pay the price for it. And the other option is to pay the price and keep those guys. And for whatever reason, that is not what has happened in NC State's program. So it's a wild time out there for the Wolfpack. They've got their quarterback. I don't know who else they're going to have around him, but it's concerning if you've been watching that program really closely. Pitt, I do want to touch on Pitt really quickly. The interesting thing is Mason Heinschel. I've searched Twitter. I search it just about every day because I'm kind of like, okay, it's probably time, right? Mason Heinschel still hasn't announced anything. I don't know if he's going to be that guy that announces anything. I could be wrong, but Mason Heinschel has not been reported to have, locked down his spot again with Pitt. So keep an eye on that. Very, very interesting stuff there. That is, I'm just going to say it. It's concerning. If you've not seen it, just say, "Hey, Mason Heinschel signed a new deal. Done. Awesome. Move on. Ooh, great story. Huge piece for the future for Pitt." Not seeing it reported, but they have added a couple pieces. Nino Oliveira, big former Penn State offensive tackle. They added him into the mix, but they also lost Rasheem Biles on the other side of the ball. So Mason Heinschel, this offense for Pitt, going to have to continue to bring it from an offensive standpoint. And they lose Kenny Johnson as well, who transfers to Texas Tech. They lost Malachi Thomas to LSU. They've lost Lynn Cooper to Vanderbilt, and they've just not really done a whole lot in the transfer portal. They have 2 commitments right now. Or Kanye Thompson is another safety that they've got committed. They grabbed a transfer from Akron on the offensive line, Keelan Davis, big offensive lineman from Akron. So they've gotten a little bit of things going on, but it's they even lost their freshman kicker, Budkowski is in the portal. So I don't know what's going on with Pitt. You'd like to see them get some retention up, pump those numbers up a little bit, one might say. So they've got a lot of things going on. But, with Rasheem Biles, I mean, he's looking at, Colorado. He's looking at Florida State. And he is, going to be super, super highly sought after in the transfer portal. So maybe he stays in the league. Maybe he ends up going to Colorado. Something to watch there as we move on. But We spent some time on Georgia Tech on the Wednesday show with Chad Bishop, kind of looking at some of their portal needs and what they're going to do. But just one quick note: Armel Mukam, a former Notre Dame defensive lineman, is fresh off a visit to Georgia Tech, and he is also expected to visit Virginia as well. He has 2 years of eligibility remaining. He's from Quebec. For those of you who know that area north of the border, he's been, kind of a reserve defensive lineman for the Irish, but looking at Virginia and Georgia Tech as of right now. And uh, Georgia Tech is also going to host Isaiah Chisholm from UCLA, former UCLA linebacker. He's got Kentucky and Arizona State involved as well. He had a bunch of tackles this season, 2.5 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles. So could be an intriguing, one to watch there. Rutgers has also hosted him. I did not see that he's committed there, but he is fresh off a visit there as well. So Georgia Tech getting some things moving in that regard. Um, and they still need a quarterback. Anthony Calandria committed to Nebraska this week, so he was on their board as somebody to keep an eye on for the Yellow Jackets. But I will say this: Boston College, kind of keeping it with maybe the blue collar type of programs in a sense. Liberty all conference running back Evan Dickens did commit to Boston College. He had almost 1,400 yards on the ground this year, 16 touchdowns, 5.8 yards per carry. So BC getting a little bit of a boost there in the transfer portal. They've not been somebody that has really been in impressive. As a whole, they lost Reed Harris, wide receiver, to Arizona State, but they do bring in Evan Dickens for the running back position. They lost an offensive lineman, Eric's Doherty to Louisville. We'll get to Louisville in just a second. Dylan Lonergan transfers to Rutgers. So they've done some things. Javarius Green comes over from North Carolina to BC. But man, they lose Turbo Richard to Indiana. Indiana's been, getting a really nice boost in the transfer portal with the season they've had and the money they've gotten injected into that program. And BC is one of the casualties of that. But Boston College does also deliver Eric's Doherty to Louisville. He has 2 years of eligibility remaining. And Louisville is somebody that is really interesting to me to watch because you have somebody in Lincoln Kienholz who, I don't know how to feel about, but well thought of, coming over from Ohio State, backing up Julian Sand. He's got some really nice athletic ability. He had a 95 QBR this year. So could this be diamond in the rough version of Jeff Brom finding somebody that works for them? Because last year they took Miller Moss, and I sat here and said, I'm not high on this. I don't think this is the right move. And sure enough, it was all over the place. It was up and down. But for Carson Beck throwing 4 interceptions, Miller Moss isn't beating Miami. There's no doubt about that. But you do have a Louisville offense now that has been able to retain Isaac Brown. They do lose Chris Bell and Colin Lacey and all of those guys, but they did add Brody Foley, Tulsa tight end, who is all conference in the AAC. There is kind of some rumor around, if he is going to be 100% healthy right off the bat. He dealt with an injury late in the year, but that is something that you should keep an eye on. Louisville has also grabbed Gerard and Jacob Smith from Kentucky on the defensive line. We mentioned Dalen Russell earlier and D'Amico Kennedy from Purdue. They lost a bunch of defensive linemen off this team, so they had to add some key pieces. They've done a nice job retaining some players as well. They've got some lines in the water as well across their entire roster to bring in more talent. But Louisville right now is just in that precarious spot where you're hoping that Lincoln Kienholz is that guy. And if he is, he's going to be the straw that stirs the drink, and you're going to be fine because you've got Jeff Brom calling plays. If he's not, it's going to be up and down and all over the place. And you hope that Isaac Brown is healthy because you lose Duke Watson. I believe you've got Kewan Brown coming back. So they're going to have a nice 1-2 punch as well. And Jaleel Skinner back in the fold at tight end too. So they do have pieces back, but they've got to continue to upgrade and put some things together. Let's get to SMU really quickly, as this our time winds down together. Trey Richardson is another one who is looking at Louisville as well. So keep an eye on that. Wide receiver from Vanderbilt and South Carolina offensive lineman Kason Henry has committed to Louisville as well, and did take visits to Kentucky and Ole Miss as well. But let's look at a question in the chat from our friend Aviation. Where did Chris Johnson Jr. go from SMU? And we'll wrap with SMU here. A lot of SMU listeners on this channel, so we appreciate you guys being here. Chris Johnson Jr. has taken visits, from my understanding, to UCF and USF. Those are two programs that make a lot of sense. They would bring him back closer to home, which I think he would value. And I think as you see Chris Johnson Jr., I think he ends up dropping down a level in a sense. And who knows kind of what role he'd have at UCF. I don't know what their roster looks like as much, but you do have a player there that is lightning fast. He just could not get consistency at SMU. He was kind of up and down all over the place as far as what you were going to get. You were going to get those explosive plays, and then you were going to get, tiptoeing around the line of scrimmage and not get what you needed from him. So best of luck to him. But SMU is sitting on a little bit of a heater. They're kind of at a spot right now where they've picked up commitments. They've gotten some really highly touted guys that have had some other major programs after them. They've really revamped their defensive line with guys like Malcolm Alcorn Crowder committing from Kansas State. They have added Yannick Smith, who was well thought of in the transfer portal as well, with some big time schools after him. Jimmy Wyrick is an all-conference defensive back coming over from UTSA. Jarvis Lee was super highly sought after with Auburn, Florida State, and Oregon among those after him, and a couple others that they've added into the mix. So they now have a few more spots to fill, and they have some key targets that are getting close to visiting or have already visited and are on the verge of making decisions. So that is what is next for SMU as far as where their class can take it up a notch. I will say this about the transfer portal rankings. Man, I don't know, and I love the company I work for, but I do not know what some of the rankings for the outgoing guys are, where they came from with SMU. And so the way transfer portal rankings work for On3 is you bring in you got the number of guys that have come in and they're ranked and they give you points. And then the guys that leave, have points assigned to them too. And then, so that's kind of where your grading comes from, is, are you, bringing in a bunch of good talent, but what are you losing too? So are you losing a bunch of good players and bringing in, okay, your ranking is going to be good or whatever. But at the same time, SMU, the guys that they've lost, I mean, every single one of them has not been a starter. They've had a couple of guys that have played. But as we look at the transfer portal for SMU, it's just strange, the ranking on some of them. I really don't understand it. Just looking at who is left, there are guys that are sitting in that 87 range and 86, and I'm like, okay, they did not see time at SMU. So it's just kind of fascinating to watch that piece of it unfold. Maybe it's a Power 4 bump, but a guy like Paris Patterson, who's literally never played a college game in 3 years, he's ranked in 86. The same level of Amarki and Akor, who kind of flashed late in the year, or a Kyron Chambers, who played a good bit for SMU, played a bunch of games. Zakai Barker, who's played a lot in college football. Omari Abor wasn't even with the team and is an 86. So when you look at these rankings and how they kind of come together, it is just as important to know what you're losing when you evaluate what's being brought in. And that's always how I judge a team and what they've done in the transfer portal is, are you bringing in players that can really help you? And this is why I think transfer portal rankings a class should almost be a little bit more of like a, not superlative, but I remember way back in the day when I worked for scout.com, I don't think they did basketball rankings. I think what happened is at the end of the year, like in April, after the late signing period, the staff back then, and I some of them are still around. Some of them have actually gone on. Evan Daniels and Brian Snow and all of those guys have gone on. I think they're out working in the NBA or agents or college guys, but they would just come out with the rankings and they would say these are the best classes. So uh, transfer portal rankings for these groups, and a lot of them would still be similar. But man, if you really dove into what teams are losing and what they're bringing in at the same level, they would get a little bit better. I don't think you'd have as many like Rutgers was a top 10 transfer portal team last year, and that didn't work out that well. There's you've got to look at fit and you've got to look at who you're losing as well. Because right now, it really seems like SMU, maybe outside of one or two spots, is upgrading as far as upside, talent, and athleticism for all of the guys that they've lost in the portal. So it's an interesting dynamic there, and it's not the whole picture because you also lose guys to graduation. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this works out. But SMU is still looking to finish out with some big names as well. But Duke as well, sticking with kind of a higher academic school and a tie from Rhett Lashley to Manny Diaz. CJ Campbell comes in from Rutgers, a really well thought of transfer there in his own right, sitting at that 87. And look, CJ Campbell is somebody that was a big deal for Rutgers to lose, and a player that has had a lot of speed, and at the same time, he's coming off of a season-ending injury. But Duke is hoping that he can bring that speed and pair really nicely with Nate Shepard in that backfield and be a really, really good group. They also added former Penn State defensive lineman Owen Waffle. They added Dylan Flowers, who's another kind of nickelish corner, Jared Richardson from Penn. So they've added some different pieces here to the fold, and we'll see what Manny Diaz can come up with, as they look to, get back to the level that they were at this year, winning the ACC. And at the same time, they have a lot of holes to fill, with a guy like Chandler Rivers leaving. And then Kayshawn Brown, who's a speedy slot, who's well thought of. He's headed out the door. So they've got some holes to fill, got some things to get done. I don't know if I hit on everybody. I really don't know if I hit on every single team. I can kind of look right here and kind of close it out with this. Syracuse, I did not hit on. And with Syracuse, I would just say they have had an interesting time in the transfer portal when I look at what they've brought in and what they're hoping to accomplish. So they brought in four transfer portal players right now. They bring in a defensive lineman from Georgia State, Jartavius Flowney, Ahmad Miller, a running back from Jackson State, Cole Weaver, a Maryland transfer, Jawan Johnson, running back from LSU, who is a tremendous high school quarterback. But they've also seen a lot leave. Caleb Singleton, a safety, goes to Mississippi State. Yasin Willis going to Kansas, a big running back that they had. Derek McDonald, a big linebacker, is in the portal. They've lost some guys and a lot of changes. Jonte Cook in the portal from DeSoto, who has bounced around to a bunch of different programs now, but he's out the door after kind of seemed like keeping his nose clean up there for the Orange this year. And Ricky Collins, their former starting quarterback in the portal, which makes a lot of sense there. But we'll see what Fran Brown and company have up their sleeve to revamp that team. So, look, guys, I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me, doing this transfer portal bonanza. It was kind of all over the place, but I enjoyed it. If you liked it, jump in the comments, let me know. But most importantly, please support our sponsors. Support Horn Legend. Go to hornlegend.com for some great gear for your favorite college football team, or also check out their jackets, pullovers, hoodies, whatever you want. Check them out and visit SocoroTequila.com and order 3 or more bottles today for free shipping on their award-winning tequila. So this has been All Access AM. Please hit the subscribe button below for me. Do that. Help us grow the channel. And we will see you guys on Monday. Hope you guys enjoy the college football playoff, semifinals, and NFL wildcard weekend. It's a great weekend. So hope you guys enjoyed the show. I'm Billy Embody. We'll see you guys Monday, 7 to 8 a.m. Central Time right here on All Access AM.